Sounds good then. I will plan on making raviolis for myself.
Okay. And after that, we are going to jump into some introductions. We're just going to go around and get to know one another. And after that, we'll just hop right into a large group discussion. You know, this is really a time for people to bring up any questions or any learning experience you had recently around compost. That can be learning experiences or anything that you've read recently. That's always great too. We can, depends on how the discussion goes, we can either end at 8 o'clock, or if people want to keep on talking, we can wrap up around 8:30. We'll just kind of see how things go. And then we'll just kind of give some notifications on upcoming events and get some feedback from you all on whether this was useful for you or not. Okay. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is just move on to introductions. I'm gonna go down my list of participant names and just kind of call on people to introduce themselves. And Doug is going to put into the chat, oh, Sandy says she keeps getting disconnected. That's too bad. Sometimes, Sandy, if you keep your video off, you might want to just call in too. There's a call-in number, if that works better.
Yeah, I finally, I was trying to work without my computer plugged in, and it seems to not want to stay with the internet when I'm not plugged in, so I've moved, and hopefully I'll be able to stay connected now.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's see. Doug, do you have those other introductions ready to go? Yes, that's great. Okay, so we're gonna go around and introduce yourself by saying who you are, where you're located, and if you are composting, what kind of composting you're doing. Are you, some people are using the Johnson-Su method, some people are vermicomposting, some are just doing the turned. Just tell us what you're up to. And I can start us off. So my name is Shona Snyder. I live in Preston, Minnesota, and I have a little vermicompost, a stacked vermicompost that I use. And I also have been experimenting a little bit with kind of a Johnson-Su setup. I don't have the tubes in place yet, but I've been using large enough wood chips that I feel like it's getting enough aeration. Am I positive on that? No, but I feel like that's happening. I also have found a pretty decent compost site that I've also been using for my garden compost. It's kind of like the town dump. Let's see here. I'm going to say, Diane, would you be willing to share next?
Okay. Okay. I'm a startup just south of Pine Island. I have about 35 acres, and I have a small market garden. The rest of it was farmed before we got it, so I probably don't know anything about the methods you're speaking of right now or anything else. It's just that when we were weeding and stuff like that, someone said, "Where's the compost pile?" And I pointed over there and said, "That's it." And so, you know, I'm just here to learn and see if I can figure out a little bit more about, you know, how to make it a real compost pile instead of just a pile of vegetation. So that's it.
Great, we're glad to have you. Connor, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. My name is Connor Dunn. I also work at LSP in the soil health program, and I live just outside Winona, Minnesota. Some experience with composting for me has all been on a small scale. Some vermicomposting for kitchen scraps, as well as a turned compost pile outside in the garden. Um, I'm really interested in learning more about how we get our compost more fungally dominated and learning more about some of the Johnson Sioux composting methods people are trying out there. So that's my main thing I want to learn during this video.
Great. How about Ryan Herman?
To exhume the body of 2-year-old Billy Blankenship.
I'm sure people had said prayers and placed him in a casket, and with love they put him in the ground. And to disturb them, you have to really be sure. And so,
Let's see. Ryan, can you hear us? I haven't been looking at the chat if he's saying anything through there. Okay, let's try. Doug, do you want to go next? You're kind of right in order there.
Sure. I'm using, I'm composting sheep manure with the goal of improving our pasture. I've got about 25 acres of pasture, and according to Lane Ingham, if we build the soil microbiology in the pasture, there's really no need for any kind of fertilizer. And so been trying for the last couple of years with the Johnson Sioux method and applying compost extract. And I've been doing vermiculture with worms in the basement for about 20 years too. So, but it's a process, learning how to, figuring out if what we're putting on is actually benefiting things enough. So interested in learning about that.
How about Jane Doe?
It's Jane Dow.
Jane Dow, thank you. I was like,
I'm sorry, I came in kind of late because I just got off work. I just have come to hear what other people are doing with their farming practices, because I'm kind of a big advocate for regenerative farming, and I'm putting together stories for our church service on people who are doing wonderful things with the soil. So I was just trying to get up to date with what's going on. I belong to Mankato Zero Waste, Fair Trade Mankato, and Transition Mankato, and I'm very active in our church on the Creation Justice, which is an environmental justice committee. So I'm just here to learn.
great, thanks to have you, Jane. Okay, let's see. I see a phone number here. 507-226-1825. Would you like to come on and introduce yourself?
That's me. I'm Kurt White, Byron, Minnesota. I've been interested in soil health since probably before Land Stewardship started it. I don't do composting, but I'm really interested in composting. I have a friend that has 6 rows of compost going right now, and I'm watching that really close. I don't have livestock anymore, so I'd have to use just biomass, and so I'm here to learn, and I'm a big fan of Elaine Ingham, and I'm hoping that I can learn some things from the microscope. That's all I got.
Glad you made it on. How about Brian DeVore?
Yeah, I'm doing it on a very small scale. I live in South Minneapolis and using kitchen scraps and that, but we have 4 oak trees, so we have a lot of oak leaves, and I've had pretty good luck with, I have a couple bins, and what I do is I will get one started, and I'll put a little soil on top, and I'll put oats on top and let that germinate and grow and kind of get the roots in there and kind of then turn that over. And I've had really good luck because it's really poor soil where we're at. It's really sandy. Kind of been able to build that up a little bit. So just really interested in learning what other folks are up to.
Okay, how about Daryl? Daryl, would you like to come on? I have to revisit. How about Eric? Eric Holm? Did I say your last name right?
It's actually Hami.
Tommy, okay. I'm terrible with last names.
Well, that's okay. I guess I've done hand turning compost for about 20 years, I think. I have a lot of wood chips because I burn wood for heat in the winter. I always end up with little chips and pieces of bark and stuff. I found that doesn't compost as well as I'd like it to. Plus a lot of kitchen scraps and just biomass from the garden. And I'm interested in vermicompost. I'm hoping somebody here or a bunch of you can talk me into it and give me enough encouragement to get started. I'm kind of like Diane too, with some of my compost piles don't get turned. They just get neglected and piled higher. It's like a pile of vegetation rather than a compost pile. I guess that's about it.
All right, thank you. Isabel Davidson?
I am from Emmons, Minnesota, which is near Albert Lee. I guess my main experience is just a little bit of vermicomposting in high school. But I'm taking a soil science class in college right now, and so we had to get on like one of these calls. There was like 2 different ones, so this was the one I could get on to, so that's why I'm here.
Great. So we have a person that we can, oh, I heard an echo. We can pick your brain. You're in some soil science classes right now, is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, I lost my placement here. How about Cassie Brown?
Yeah, hey everyone. I just kind of recently moved to a small farm in western Wisconsin, and so I've been transforming my previous composting skills from a small urban lot to now 10 acres of land, and working on some hot composting from our chicken and goat manure, working on some Johnson Sioux bioreactors, and then I also really enjoy worm composting with King Stropharia mycelium, which has been really fun. So we always have lots going on around here, but I'm excited to hear what y'all are doing too.
Yeah, and I should say that Cassie helped us out one time with a soil, a microscope course. Farmers brought in soil samples, and Cassie helped lead us through in identifying organisms. So she's another good person to ask questions of.
I've got the microbe poster behind me. I don't know if anybody can see it in the small video, but.
Janet Anderson.
I've been doing worm composting for probably 30, maybe almost 35 years. Got started with worms eating my garbage. I studied civil engineering, so I have a concern about solid waste. I went to an Acres USA convention here, was one time. And I followed Acres USA for a while, which really got me interested in more about the soil. And I also went to a vermicomposting conference in Michigan before Mary Abelhoff died, and I learned a lot about soil there and the microbial, whether it leans fungal or bacterial and some other things like that. And I've never heard of Johnson Sioux, so I'm hoping to learn about that.
Yeah, it's definitely it's kind of the new thing in composting. You can definitely share out a link to that. I'm going to check back to see if either Daryl or Ryan Herman are available. Daryl or Ryan? Okay, we'll keep moving. Jim Williams.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I farm in south central South Dakota, and I don't know, I've been interested in soil health since I was a kid, and I'm 63. But I've been building compost since I was in junior high anyway, and I kind of just learned how to make compost about 3 years ago when I went to see Elaine Ingham in Sioux Falls for 3 days. And that just kind of put everything together. And so I've been using compost extract on my crops, and I've eliminated fungicide and some herbicides. I still use some. But fertilizers I just fertilized 4 fields this year out of, I think, about 13 crop acre fields. And also I put some on pastures in the fall of 17 or 18. And it's just unreal what's happened to the pastures that I've sprayed. And last fall I wasn't able to because it was raining all the time, and we got done combining, and then it snowed the next day and didn't happen. But I'm hoping to do some this fall.
That's phenomenal, Jim. I'm sure many people will have questions for you on this call. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having that.
How about Kevin Anderson?
Hey everyone. Yeah, so my wife Annalie and I run a market garden in Stockholm, Wisconsin. It's kind of on the border with Minnesota near the Mississippi River. We have about 3 acres certified organic and have been switching to reduced tillage and compost mulching systems for our production. And so we end up buying in a lot of compost, and the composted dairy manure we've been buying in isn't really balanced to be putting on that thick. And so I'd like to be able to produce our own more balanced compost with some of the stuff that we produce on farm. And we tried a little bit in the past with rotted hay and getting that to break down, but it never really heated up well. And so right now I've made the first like real serious effort with it, with probably a 40-yard pile, mixed 50-50 green chop and shredded old hay and some dairy manure to start it going. And it's been heating well, and I'm turning that with the loader tractor with the manure bucket on it every few days, a little slower now that it's cooling down. But it's still a first attempt, and I don't know how long it's going to take to finish it or what the finished product is going to look like.
Great. Great. Yeah, that's really, Annalie has been kind of informing me of what you guys have been up to, so it's great to have you on.
Thanks.
Sandy Dietz, are you still on?
Yep, I'm here. We have a small vegetable farm near Altura, Minnesota. We've been doing vegetables for about 24 years. Long time ago, we played around with compost teas, and that's when I first met Elaine Ingham, which totally fascinated with her. But since then, our only compost has been static piles of vegetable trimmings. We don't have much for livestock. And we're looking to move into a more no-till operation And I want to really build our soil and improve the biological activity in the soil. And I'm really interested in learning more about the Johnson-Su method and also the best ways to apply it to inoculate our soil. So that's what I'm here to hopefully learn.
Great. Todd Lemke, probably butchered that last name.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, Todd Lemke from Watkins, which is kind of central Minnesota. I have a small farm that we kind of do along the side with our regular jobs. We have cow-calf pairs that we do rotational grazing. And so in the wintertime, we tend to develop quite large manure piles mixed in with I kind of do some deep bedding in the sheds with cornstalk bales and sometimes some waste hay. And so we end up with some fairly good sized piles by spring that we try to compost for a year. But I'm wanting to learn a little bit more about what other people are doing, and that's why I'm on today.
Great, thanks for being here. And I think we're on our last person, William Brockway. William, are you available to join us? Looks like your mute is off. Can you try talking? William, if you're talking, we can't hear you. You might have to put your information in the chat. Okay, and then if I've missed anyone, I'll just open it up for Daryl, Ryan, William. If any of you can hop on here in the next like 30 seconds, that'd be great. Otherwise, we'll move on to the large group discussion. Okay, I think we're just gonna head in. All right, so this is what I say. I think it'd be easiest if everyone just took themselves off of mute, unless you have a lot going on in your background. And I'm just gonna open it up. I really don't wanna have to do too much facilitation. You all have a lot of good questions I'm sure you've come with and a lot of interesting thoughts. So go ahead and just take yourselves off of mute and start it going.
Let's hear about Johnson-Su.
Who wants to tell us about the Johnson-Su?
Well, I can. I think a lot of people probably have a little more experience with actually building the Johnson-Su bioreactors than I do, but I've done a lot of research on them and have attempted a few. So essentially, though, it's a dryland composting system, or started out as by David Johnson from, I think, New Mexico State University. And it's a static pile, so you don't turn it, but you're essentially trying to create kind of an enclosure for the compost where oxygen can reach all of the material within 12 inches of fresh air. So you use some like PVC pipes down the center to create air exchange. And then you can add worms to the system after several months of it heating up kind of on its own. And then you add the worms and it becomes this super biologically rich amendment that just shows a lot of potential for the best way to grow a lot of fungi. So whoever else wants to jump in and maybe describe the actual structure more would be great. I'll put it on because
me.
Is using or adding the worms later, is that a real key component, a real necessary component of the Johnson Sioux?
You know, I've heard of people doing that. I think at about like the 9-month mark. I think that's what Clifford Johnson does in Paynesville, Minnesota. He's got about 2,000 organic acres that he runs, and he's been applying compost to all those acres using the Johnson Sioux method. And I believe he does it for the full year, and at about 9 months, he adds the worms. He feels like it's a necessary component.
Do you know what kind of rate he's putting that compost on for that much acreage?
Yeah, it's like, oh, I had this written down. We have a video with him, and I'm pretty sure he gives the rate in there, but he uses the compost extract. He takes about, I think about like a gallon's worth of the finished compost, extracts it into like maybe about 30 gallons, and then is spraying that out. And I don't remember what that turns out to be in terms of per acre, but I'll also post the video in there, and you can see he's got like six large bins of compost, and that's enough to cover all of his acreage.
Speaking of videos, if people just, if you want to know kind of how to build a Johnson Sioux bioreactor, you can just type in Johnson-Sioux, and that's SU, you know, on a Google search, and there's a number of short videos out there about how to build them. I'm not a great carpenter or mechanic, and I've been able to build them, and you know, you need a pallet and some welded wire and some landscape fabric and some PVC pipe, and that creates a 5 foot high by about 3 foot across cylinder that you put your mixture of wood chips and organic materials in there and basically let it sit for a year. But there's a number of really good videos along with the one Shona is going to share with you with Olaf and what's Olaf's son's name again?
Olaf and Clifford.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what you mean by compost extract. I also met Elaine Ingham at the at the worms, vermilionium it was. But we were talking about soil soup and not compost extract.
What did she mean by a soil soup? I've never heard that term before.
You would take, okay, so like you put your compost in a burlap bag or something like that, and you soak it a while, and then you take the juice, which is kind of a dark brown at that point, and you aerate it, and you put molasses in there to feed the organisms, and until you can make a big soup with more of the organisms than were already there.
So basically a compost tea, just different name.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what is the compost extract?
Yeah, so the compost extract is kind of actually what you're describing. It's like a brief agitation of really high quality compost into fresh water. So you're not adding any foods like molasses or anything like that. You're just simply trying to extract the microbes off of compost. And so it happens really quickly. And if you let it sit for too long, like longer than a few minutes, you can lose oxygen in the water, which would be really bad. So And so that's in contrast to the compost tea, where you're actually adding foods and you're making sure that you're aerating it with like a mechanical pump. And that's where it becomes more of a tea, but it's a little harder to make. You have to be really careful about getting enough oxygen. So I think soil soup and extract might be the same or similar.
Thank you.
And it looks like William Brockway made a comment in the chat. His microphone isn't working, but he has been attempting aerobic composting and wants to go the next steps in the process of using the product. William, if you have any more specific questions around that, we'll keep an eye on the chat if you want to put them in there. Jim, I know that Doug posted a question for you in the chat too. We're just kind of curious to know, like, a little bit more about your composting system, how you got it to be such a good product, and how maybe like you're tracking the changes in your fields. That'd be good to know too.
Okay. I don't know. I got a 500-gallon cone tank. I got to take these headphones off. I can't hear myself talk. I got a 500-gallon cone tank and with an aerator, and I don't like the tea bags myself. So what off to the side of the tank, I put an outlet, so like right at the top of the cone. So I just dump my compost. I have to screen it, and then I dump it into the tank when it's aerating, and I like to aerate it about 3 hours. And then I have another tank that I have foods in, molasses, and I make a seed soak, or I'll use fish hydrosolate. And if I want anything else I want to add in my food tank. And so then when I go to spray, and the reason I don't like to tease myself is because I cover a lot of acres, and I don't like to, I can't wait 3 days for a tea to brew. So I'll put the compost extract in the, I also have a filter tank, so everything goes through the filter tank, and I'll put the compost extract in there. I'll put the foods in there, because I put foods with them when I go to spray. I don't have them in when I'm extracting, and then I clean the tank out with water, and that all goes into the sprayer, and then I'll mix my next batch of compost. So that's mixing while I'm out spraying, and then when I come back, I'm ready for the next load. So at tops, I can get about 4 loads a day. It's which covers, I got about 50 acres, so I'm covering about 200 acres a day.
Are you spraying that with just a regular boom sprayer?
I don't know what else you want to know.
Are you spraying that with just a regular boom type sprayer on your fields?
He might have to put his headphones back on.
Oh, sure.
Jim, can you hear us?
Oh, I just put my headphones back on. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Sandy Dietz has a question for you.
I was just wondering that about when you spray your, I guess not tea, but when you're out spraying, do you use a regular boom type sprayer?
Yes.
And you don't have any problem with any clogging or anything?
Not anymore. I used to.
Okay. We have a blast sprayer, like an orchard type sprayer for our fields. And I was wondering if we'd be able to spray something like that without clogging.
Oh, I'm sure it'll go through anything. So that's what I have, that filter tank, and I just kind of made my own filter. It's a series of screens in some different, I use some of them big, them big plastic tubs like they make, put or that molasses in for lick tubs. And I made my own series of screens. So I go from coarse to, my finest one's a 300, because I couldn't find a 400 mesh, but it seems to work great.
Okay.
Jim, are you doing your own checking? Are you using your own microscope? Or are you sending them in? Like, how do you keep track of your, if it's gone anaerobic or aerobic?
Oh, I have my own microscope. And I'm just kind of learning the difference of the microorganisms. So,
Great.
But my compost is aerobic, and I'm not worried about it. But I know I don't know everything. So,
What was the amazing result you got when you put it on your pastures?
well, I don't know, the pasture, well, I got native pastures, and they just got thick, and just unbelievable thick, and the weeds disappeared. The weed pressure just went down. There's a few weeds out there, but the pressure went off, and the undercarriage in the grass just got so thick that next summer. It was just unbelievable. But the crop's the same way. I mean, it's just unbelievable what it's doing.
Jim, did you say, just kind of looking at Doug's comment over here about how long the immersion is, did you say that for the quantity you're doing, you're immersing your compost for 3 hours, or did I mishear that?
Well, I'm running my activator for 3 hours. 2.5 to 3 hours where it's run under air, with air. Just, to break the microorganisms loose out of the compost.
Nice. Yeah, I think that question, it really depends like on the quantity that you're using, and if you have it being oxygenated or like extremely agitated, it can really vary. Like in a 5-gallon bucket size, you could have it immersed and be like really, really shaking it up with your hands and kind of massaging a bag of compost for a couple of minutes. But if you have an oxygenation system going, then yeah, a couple of hours is fine. You probably wouldn't want it to go much longer than that, just because there aren't any foods in the water, like just general, for people that are trying to replicate it. But yeah, it really varies, I think, to answer that question, Doug.
Thanks, Cassie. Jim, Doug says it sounds like we all need to come out to your place once Corona is over and see your setup. How far are you from Sioux Falls?
Oh, yeah. About 2.5, 3 miles. It's 3 hours west, maybe.
We'll have to get a big old van and come and visit you. Looks like we got a new person on the phone, 617-888-5063. Just want to see if you would like to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your interest in compost, or if you are composting.
Yeah, this is Michael with the Practical Farmers of Iowa. Very much into compost. I'm hopefully, well, I'm going to get myself a microscope soon. But yeah, I've been making compost teas for a while, and I guess my question is, as far as the extract versus the tea, it doesn't sound like there's much difference in terms of quality or microbial composition. Is that right? Like, assuming that the molasses and the aeration works, you'll just get more of what's already in there. So, so I guess that's my one question. And then I wonder if anyone actually has done any work with leaf mold, because that's something I'm interested in getting into. Thanks so much.
So my understanding in terms of like extract versus tea brew is like you can actually feed certain foods during the tea brewing process to promote more like fungal growth or more protozoa growth. So you can have you can actually set it up so you bolster populations of certain types of organisms. Whereas the extract is that you're just pulling out the organisms that are in that finished compost. You aren't growing any more organisms past what's in that finished product. You're just taking them out of it. Whereas the tea brewing is like you are actually increasing populations of certain type of microbes. So anyone correct what I'm saying if that's wrong. And then Michael, I wasn't sure what you said on that last piece of leaf mold. Can you tell us more about that?
Leaf mold, M-O-U-L-D, some guess. Big in Europe or France or something, and basically decomposition of shredded wet leaves. And I guess it's a longer process, but no nitrogen is going to introduce, more fungal communities. And I guess I was just wondering if anyone has any experience with that at any kind of scale.
I'm not so scientific about it, but I compost in the backyard. Usually it's about 4 foot to a side cubic. And I often collect bags of leaves from the neighbors because I've never had enough trees to get enough leaves. I don't stir it very much because that's hard work. Maybe once a year I would take it apart and throw the part that's kind of, I would try to separate what's clearly not rotted from what is, but what is rotted I throw it right on the garden, and what's not quite done I put it back in. I throw it at the bottom and start over. To some degree that is leaf mold, but I also put a few things in that have nitrogen in it. I'm kind of in favor of doing it. I mean, there are special reasons why you might want to do the fancy stuff, but it also just works to do it simply. It just might take longer.
I have made piles of leaves because I have a lot of leaves here. I've shredded them. I've done this a few years, shredded the leaves and put them in a pile, and over the winter, I figure the snow gets in there and moistens it, and I'll have a great compost pile in the spring. But no, I still had a pile of dry leaves in the spring. Even shredded, they don't seem to, they're not wet enough, or they don't, I'm not sure what the problem is. But so this last winter or last fall, I just covered them with a tarp, and I kept them dry, and then I had a pile of dry leaves this spring for mulch, and that worked pretty well. I use the Ruth Stout method in my garden, so I need a lot of mulch. Anybody have any advice on getting the leaves to break down or keeping them wet or whatever I need to do?
Mix some dirt with them.
Yeah, I did that. You mean a lot of dirt, like 50-50 or?
Oh, no, just sprinkle in layers.
I did that.
Are you, when you're building your compost, are you wetting it the entire time?
No.
I would consider doing that, maybe setting up a sprinkler, and as you're building the pile, just making sure everything's getting pretty well soaked.
Okay.
I've done that, and sometimes in the spring there, I would say it probably is anaerobic. There are places where the wet leaves are still pretty intact. And so maybe the pipes in the Johnson Sioux, I mean, I didn't know the net name, but I've thought about putting in pipes. I've wondered about keeping the debris from plugging up the pipes and the holes. So I think it could be an oxygen thing.
Yeah. When I clean out my worm bin, which is in the basement, takes kitchen scraps all year long, I sometimes dump at least some of what comes out of the worm bin out inside, just onto the outside. So I introduce a few worms. And if there's something kind of rich in the middle of the compost pile, like a hunk of tallow, I have found worms overwintering in there. And I think they help break down the leaves.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question about my worms.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so, well, my worms did survive the Chicago winter, this past winter, and that's awesome. But separating them from the dried or the finished castings is a perennial issue. I mean, I've tried putting light on them. I've tried feeding one side versus the other. I am relegated to basically using a screen to filter out the worms from the compost and basically picking out the worms that are like hanging from the screen. So I guess I was wondering about if anyone has some best management practices for separating worms from finished castings.
What's your scale, Michael?
Backyard.
Okay. I could answer, but I don't want to shut anybody else out. Okay. I tried all those ways. I learned a lot about worms by picking through the piles. I do stop feeding one side, and I take out one side and put the new chips in that side, and keep feeding. No, don't stop feeding the other side. Okay, so they've done part of that work already. They move into the new chips where I put the new food. Okay, I take that stuff outside. I use the screen too. I've learned that if I put some of the finished compost on the screen over a tub, and then I run water through it, and I use the same water over and over, and pretty much I wash out the fine stuff, and it separates the chips that are still big, and a lot of the worms stay on top too. And then it's not very hard to run your fingers through the water in the tub, and you can pretty near get every worm. It's easier. It's still time consuming, but it's easier than the other ways I tried.
I don't know if it actually works, but I remember seeing at a conference where someone took a screen and laid it on top of a finished pile and put fresh food on the top, and supposedly the worms would go up through the screen into the top and then you could lift them off. I've never tried it.
That's the idea behind the flow through vermicompost systems.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got the flow. I got the stacking. Like 4 trays, and I think part of the issue is that my household produces too much vegetable matter to really kind of give the worms a chance to sort of go to one side before we have to like put it on that side. But then, yeah, I lost my train of thought there. But I do like the idea of putting something on top of the finished worms. The finished castings, maybe some cantaloupe or something. Yeah.
Seeing if we have any questions from people who have been a little bit more quiet. Hannah, you haven't been able to introduce yourself. Would you like to introduce yourself and share your interest in composting, or if you are composting?
I'm not composting at all yet. I'm just trying to learn, and if I did start, I think it'd be more of just a family garden style size. I'm definitely gonna look up this Johnson Sioux thing. I'd never heard that name. And yeah, I found it interesting hearing about the difference between the extract and the tea. I'm gonna look into that more too, I guess. I'm really just trying to learn and figure out what's what with composting, so.
Sounds good. Kevin, do you have any, oh, you might be busy. I'm curious if people have a microscope, how many people are using microscopes to check their compost? Jim, you said you are. Cassie, I know Cassie's got a microscope. And Cassie, she's gone through, I'm pretty sure she's gone through all of Elaine Ingham's courses. So she's like graduated those programs. She's really good to check with if you have any questions on microbes.
Yeah, I just put my email in the chat over there. So if anybody does it, like Shona said, I've been through Elaine's classes and still work with the microscope quite a bit. So definitely let me know if you have any questions.
What size microscope is the best to try to get? I mean, how big of one do you need, or?
We can find a link probably to put in the chat. There's kind of specific ones that Dr. Ingham recommends, but any kind of like soil microbiology microscopes really only have to go up to 40x, or a combined kind of total of 400 magnification, which is a pretty affordable size microscope. Like you can obviously get really fancy ones that are in the, near $1,000, but I think the general one is like around 200 or so, and it works really well. Just you don't need to have much higher than that 400x. And the biggest thing about the microscope you need for soil microbiology and for looking at compost, or your compost extract, is to have this what's called an iris diaphragm, which allows you to shadow the subject that you're looking at, because the microbes are smaller than what 400x allows you to see. But with the shadowing, you can like see bacteria, and you can see all the protozoa, fungal hyphae, even if it's clear. And so I'll see real quick if I can find the link to the one that's recommended. But yeah.
That would be awesome.
Anyone else who's using a microscope? If that's something that people are interested in, we could always see if we could set something up this winter. Land Stewardship Project does have a microscope, and actually I could share my screen and we could look at microbes too.
Cool.
If that's of interest to people, we could definitely do that.
So I'm looking at the chat box here, and Diane put a comment. I'm trying to move my land to organic. I was wondering if anyone has ideas of how to source manure from cattle farms or other options to import compost in large quantities. And yeah, so I'll pose that question. And Kevin Anderson, you were mentioning that you sourced some compost for your vegetable farm, and now you're making your own. Do you have any insights about that process?
We're still just starting to make our own, and it's not at good enough quality for us to use yet. I think it just is going to take more time for it to get finished, and being the first time I've really made it, I don't know if it's going to be good enough. We buy in Cowsmo compost from Cochrane, Wisconsin. Most people in our area that are organic buy from them, and they have a really good product, but it was in short availability this spring, so it kind of set us back with doing the no-till production.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be, Diane, I'd probably see if you have local neighbors who could work with you on that. You're over, did you say you're over near Rochester, Byron area?
North of there.
North of there, that's right, Pine Island. Well, you know who to talk to is probably Kurt Twite on the phone here, because he's got connections all over that area.
Yeah, I talked to one of the dairies, and they said the guy who I talked to said they didn't know anybody who had excess manure, but, you know, they suggested just like fencing off an area and running some cattle on it. So I've heard of Cowsmo. I didn't know the feasibility cost-wise of trucking that over to Pine Island from Wisconsin. And then I was wondering, like, and might be like too basic for this group, but I was wondering, like, do I put that on as a top dressing, or would it be better to incorporate it with like a rotary harrow, you know, if I were to get some of that stuff?
I'm going to call on Kurt and try and get him to answer, since he's over somewhat in that area or knows farmers in that area. Kurt, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm still on. You talked, I think, about rototilling, and I would not rototill. You know, with a rototiller or a compost in, you might shovel it in or fork it in, you know, because rototiller is really raises whoopee with the fungus. I can check and see if I can. I'm watching some compost now, so I'm checking to see, and that's not very far from Pine Island. That might be available in another couple of months. I don't know, before winter, I think, sets in, or it might be next spring. How far, which direction are you from Pine Island?
I'm a few miles south, pretty much due south. And I wasn't thinking of rototilling, but using a rotary harrow with the vertical tines that wouldn't change the stratification of the soil. It would just kind of.
Yeah, you don't want to. Yeah, that might be a good idea. You got to be really careful with the rototiller that people use for the gardens is really hard on the condition of the microbes in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
It's all right once in a while, but if you do a lot of it, it's hard on it. So I will check, and then Sona's got your contact information, right?
Uh-huh. And you can
I'll check with her.
Yeah.
And I do, soil health and no-till, but I haven't gotten into compost myself. I'm interested, but I had so many other irons in the fire right now.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what to do. There's been soybeans on the ground this year, that have about 30 acres of soybeans, and they're going to be harvested this fall. And I was trying to figure out a way to, whatever fertilizer was put on to avoid, chemical fertilizers. And, I've got that large quantity. So I've been doing some research, but I haven't really gotten too far or too much like viable options, it seems. So, but it's, the farm was in CRP for about 15 years. Then it came out, and then it's been traditionally farmed the last 3 or 4 years. And we just took it over June the 1st of this year.
Well, you should be in pretty good shape if it was in CRP for that long, unless they put an awful lot of chemicals on it. So it should be in pretty good shape. But it'd be interesting to look at it with a fork and shovel it, just do a few things with that. Shona can probably give you my phone number and you can call me.
Okay, yeah. Yeah,
Alrighty.
down at the south end where the ground's wetter, I've seen a few worms as I've been out there.
Look for worm castings on top. That's a pretty good indication.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Glad to have a networking piece going on here. There's been kind of an interesting back and forth between Doug and Kevin about the Cosmo compost. So one thing to be wary of is with those larger composting companies, they are using those big burners. And like Kurt was saying with the rototiller, they are really hard on the mycorrhizal fungi and also like your larger nitrogen producing organisms like your nematodes and protozoa. So that's something to really check for. It's really, compost with a lot of bacteria in it, it's okay, but it's not going to do what you want it to do to really change your soil ecology around. You want to get those higher level predators in your soil ecology mix. Well, we got about 15 minutes left here, so if you have any burning questions that you haven't asked yet, this is the time to start asking.
With the Johnson Sioux bioreactor, if anybody has used it or knows of anybody that works on it, have you checked to see the type of microbes that are dominant in it? Is it I suppose it depends on what you're putting in, but a large diversity, or do you tend to get a little bit more fungal dominant? Does anybody know?
This is Kurt White. I think Clifford Johnson up there at Thamesville is probably your best source to get some information, because I know he uses it as a kind of a starter for his corn, and he said that the fungal will follow the roots out on the corn, if I understood him correctly. Do you have anything on that, Shona?
Not so much on Clifford. I think Bob Miro just hopped on and he could talk a little bit. He's built a Johnson Sioux too. Bob, can you hear us? Are you available? Yeah, Sandy, I would say that of what I've heard from Clifford, oh, looks like he hopped off. What I've heard from Clifford is that it produces the highest amount that he's seen in fungal dominance. And I think he does get I've seen some of his compost under the microscope, and he's got the larger organisms like nematodes and protozoa in there as well. But definitely, like, it is a load, it's a mass of mycorrhizal fungi.
Okay. Do you think it would be beneficial to even add, talking about the leaf mold before, if you got some leaf duff or something from out in the woods or from some area that hasn't been disturbed for a while, would that help?
Yeah, like to use as like an inoculant?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. Like even Elaine Ingham says, like really all you need is like a thimbleful of good soil from like a forest or like a long established native prairie, just so you're inoculating with a lot of biodiversity. Yep.
And take from the best place you can find.
Where's your best place, Jim?
Well, I go out to the native prairie with my loader and I'll just skin a little dirt, like a couple inches of dirt and grass and everything, and that's my inoculant. And the grass, it all goes right in the compost pile. And it's all the hardworking native organisms from our area, you know.
Yep, yep.
This is Kurt. Jim, how do you turn your composter? You got a hot pile, or how do you use? I don't remember. Or do you use?
I use a loader.
Okay. And how tall and how wide is your pile?
Well, I don't know, but I make them 50-foot long because that works with the soaker hose, with the 50-foot soaker hose, because I lay them on top to, if I need to wet it. But I just, I don't know, it's probably 4 foot tall and 50-foot long, and I don't know how wide, 6-8 feet wide.
And how often do you turn that? When your temperature gets up to 140 or so?
Yeah. Well, like Elaine says, it can be 130 for 3 days, I think, and maybe 140 for 3 days, 150 for 2 days, 160, you got to turn it. So
yeah,
it just, but it varies on the pile. So I go by the temperature. That's what I didn't know anything about before, was the temperature. And I didn't know anything about how to feed the fungi, but you know, I've learned that from Elaine.
So what do you use for green and brown?
Oh, well, I like prairie hay for brown. Straw, prairie hay, native prairie hay that's mature, because that's more fungal. And green, I use alfalfa or alfalfa grass mix hay. But for the real green, I'll go out and cut road ditch hay for getting some actual real green in it. Just brome, and there's medium red clover in my road ditches, and native hay.
Jim, do you add some of the existing compost to that new pile you're making to get it started?
Definitely, yes.
And Jim, are you also adding manure in there?
A little. I have cattle. I've made compost. You don't have to have manure to make good compost. You know, the main thing you want to think about when you're making a compost is fungi. You want to feed the fungi. But you don't have to have manure. But I do make a compost. I let the cattle make it, actually, and then I'll put bales out, and they'll in the early spring, and they'll eat the hay, and I'll put straw bales and grass bales and alfalfa bales, and they just maul it around and eat it, and then I just pile it up and make the compost pile. It works great. It's got manure, hay, hair, pea, and just I'll usually put a little extra green in it, and then just pile it up, and that's the start of a compost pile, and it just works super.
How often do you take the temperature of that pile, Jim?
Well, daily when I need to. Once a day.
Great. I'm gonna call and see if we can get Todd or Isabel, if you guys have any questions or thoughts of what you're hearing.
I know I've enjoyed listening because I got some good ideas for this upcoming springtime.
Great, that's awesome.
I don't really have any questions. I was just supposed to listen and then write down notes of what I've learned, so I'm good.
Sounds good.
Is a shredder, do most people use a shredder before putting a compost in a pile? Or the green matter?
For ours, I use a shredder both for the brown and for the green, but it's a pretty big scale one.
I say it's unnecessary. It's kind of like grinding hay for cattle. You don't need to.
Well, it looks like we might have Bob Miro coming on the call. Bob, are you on?
Yeah, I finally got it figured out.
We got 5 minutes to go. That's good to see good to see your face.
Yeah, well, you as well.
Would you mind, Bob, just kind of sharing who you are, where you live, and then what your interest is in compost, or if you have been composting?
Sure. So, yeah, for those of you that don't know me, Bob Miro, I reside in Caledonia, Minnesota. We farm organically, conventionally, and we started heading down the soil health path some time ago, joined up with LSP, never looked back since there, and joined into Elaine Ingham's course some time ago now, last spring, and haven't gotten back to it. Really haven't done any composting. I tried last spring, and I just really haven't gotten back to it. So took a lot of courses online through the Soil Food Web, and yeah, just at the microscope portion of the class that super excited about, but certainly taught me a lot, and looking forward to learning more as well.
Well, it looks like we got about 4 minutes here. We've had a lot of good discussion, Bob, just to let you know, around composting, the difference between extracts and teas. Some people didn't know about the Johnson-Su method, so we were talking a bit about that and the pros and cons of that system.
Sure.
How about any last questions?
Do you, I mean, I guess not to speak out of place here, So do you have some of the individuals that we have online, are they using a windrower at all with their composting methods, if they are composting?
Kevin, are you guys using a windrow method?
We're using a windrow method, but we're not using a windrower. We're using just a bucket tractor to roll it.
Okay, all right. How are you able to get some analysis on what you've done so far, Kevin?
No, we're very early on. This is my first serious windrow attempt.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Getting things to temperatures and stuff that you feel are adequate, or?
Yeah, that actually was easy. I've tried in the past with just shredded hay, and that would heat up and then cool down. And then with green chop, it would heat up and then turn to slime. Then mixing the two and some manure in there, heated up to about 150 and stayed there for 10 days or so, and is now cooling down a bit and probably 130, 140.
Okay, all right. Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome news. Okay. Have so there was nobody else that was using or has used the Johnson Sioux at all bioreactor?
Cassie was, but she had to leave the meeting.
Okay.
Cassie Brown, she's in.
Yeah, we had Cassie Brown.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm a little delinquent
And then
here.
we have another.
Go ahead.
No worries. There's another farmer on here, Jim, who's also been using the windrow, like windrow, but then turning it with a bucket. Is that right, Jim?
Yes.
Yeah.
How
Jim, did you
things
ever
went for
try
you,
the
Jim?
Johnson Sioux method?
No. To me, it's not. To me, it doesn't seem aerobic enough. I mean, it's probably fine. I just never tried it.
Okay. Shona, did you try a Johnson Sioux bioreactor, Shona?
Not really. No, I have the setup. Okay. I just need to get the tubes, the air tubes in place and fill it up. So that's been laziness on my part. Plus, I found a really good wood chip pile that's composted on its own for years. And when I dug into it, the fungal dominance in there was insane. So I was like, do I really need to build my own? Or if I could just keep coming here and digging it up. So I might do that.
Great idea.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
So it is 8:31, and I want to be respectful of people's time. This was really enjoyable. It's definitely a passion of mine to be doing this work, and I think that there's growing interest out on the landscape to learn more about what makes up our soil, what makes a healthy soil. So we would like to probably continue this work, and Connor's going to ask a few questions just about feedback on this discussion. I also just want to raise up with any of you who might be interested. We are actively working towards promoting soil health within our state legislature of Minnesota and also at the federal level as well. You know, we really see this connection of building healthy soil is really critical to our water quality, to sequestering carbon, for our food systems, and for healthy communities. So if that's something you would be interested in being a part of, we're doing listening sessions here. Our next one is next Wednesday, the 30th, and then we have another one in October. And I can put a link in the chat if you would be interested in participating in those listening sessions. We're really interested in farmers being a part of those discussions and sharing, what policies are going to work to make sure we get healthy soils back out onto our landscapes. Connor, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So we at LSP want to grow this composting work into the future, and so my question to you guys and you can either put your answers in the chat box or say them out loud. Was what are some things during this call that you found beneficial and that you might take back to your farms or backyards and try out? And then along with that is, do you guys want to have another compost call in the future? And do you want it to be different? Shona mentioned maybe doing a call where we could look at some microscope slides. Is that something you guys would be interested in? I see some heads shaking, yes. So that's something we can think about and try and put together. But you can say your answers out loud or put them in the chat box as well.
Great. Hannah says another compost call would be great.
I'd be interested in seeing the slides.
All right, Kurt's interested in seeing some slides.
Yep.
I like the compost call because my wife says I need somebody to talk to about this stuff.
Absolutely.
We'll take you, Jim. We want you on these calls. That's great.
Jim, post-corona, you just need to move on over to Minnesota. We got a lot of people to talk to over here.
I got better ground than I have.
Yeah, Sandy says we're gonna go visit Jim, right? We're all like, yes. We're all shaking our head, yes. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you very much for joining, and we'll try and get another one of these organized here. Probably more in the winter after harvest. It was really a pleasure just to see all your faces and to hold some discussion. Yeah, so go ahead and leave whenever you would like. If you have more things to add in the chat, go ahead and do that as well.
Thanks, Shona, and thanks everybody for sharing the information. I really enjoy visiting with this stuff.
Great. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shona.
Thanks for organizing. And we need to keep thinking and keep working and doing things together. Bye.
Yes. Thanks, Kurt. Bye, Brian.